Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. And now, Tider Insider TV.
Well, it's good to see Alabama football practicing in January. That means that Alabama's still playing. The Crimson Tide returned to Tuscaloosa on Tuesday, one day after shutting out Clemson 24-6 in the Sugar Bowl. With the win, Alabama will take on Georgia in Atlanta in the national championship game on Monday. And good evening, everyone, and welcome into Tider Insider TV, presented each and every week by Buffalo Rock, alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris, and the things people don't see on television is you dropping your Pepsi prior to the show and kind of halfway opening it. So you got, good news is good, you got the spew out of the way, so all's good. And here we go. That was a smart move to kind of pre-open, though, a little bit, so it's all good here. But remember to pick up some great Pepsi products, Diet Pepsi, whatever you enjoy from Buffalo Rock the next time you're at your local grocery store. Rodney, we're certainly enjoying Alabama playing in the national championship game. The rubber match between Alabama and Clemson in the semifinal was nothing like the previous two meetings. It was low scoring and wasn't very close. Alabama was in control from start to finish, held Clemson to 188 total yards. About 60 of those came on a final drive for Clemson, where they came up short on fourth down. Alabama punched its ticket for an all-SEC national championship game. After Monday's win, the Bama players felt like they made a statement.
Not to knock Clemson, but I just feel like they wasn't built like us. I feel like I saw a lot of plays where it seemed like they was physical in their conference, but as far as with us and what we do in team run, they wasn't hitting like us.
I feel like we just made a statement that we definitely deserve to be in. A lot of people counted us out. They didn't want us to be in this playoff game. Just after the night, I feel like we showed that we definitely belong.
Unfortunately, there seems to always be an unfortunately the way this season's gone with injuries. The Tide suffering a couple of more, including another linebacker. Anthony Jennings announced on Twitter today he's out for the championship game with a knee injury he sustained with under 3 minutes left in the game, and he had been dominant. I mean, he had just absolutely destroyed both of Clemson's offensive tackles. You're seeing some of his highlights here. That hit led to the Deron Payne interception. Bama also saw starting right guard Lester Cotton leave the game with an injury. His status is unclear heading into Monday's game. We'll talk more about the national championship in a moment, but first, Rodney, let's go back to that 18-point win over Clemson. I want to get your takeaways. We got to start with the defense, because even though the defense has been really good, again this year leading the nation in scoring defense, which is the most important category there is in my opinion, what we saw Monday night brought back some memories from 2011, 2012, 2009. Some of those defenses, Rodney, they just absolutely did not let Clemson get on track at all.
Yeah, we've talked about how the injuries really affected this defense throughout the season, ever since the first game against Florida State. This team never really defensively developed that kind of maybe consistency, cohesiveness, whatever it might be. And a lot of that, obviously, you lose when you have all those injuries. And, Gary, LSU game, Mississippi State, all the games at the tail end of the season, this Alabama defense just – up front defensively, they just didn't seem to have that same dominant feel to them, against the run. Certainly didn't seem to generate much pass rush, but this defense was fresh. They were revitalized. You could tell you had, certainly Anthony Jennings was dominant, as you mentioned, but you had Terrell Lewis, Christian Miller, Raekwon Davis, Deron Payne, Deshaun Hand. I mean, you go on and on. All of those guys seem to play at a different level. I mean, it's kind of like what we have become accustomed to around here.
And offensively, moved the ball pretty well in the first half. 3 red zone positions, only got 10 points, a field goal and a touchdown. Second half, quite frankly, after the turnover, the fumble to start the third quarter, and Alabama had the defensive interception by Payne that led to a touchdown, then a pick 6 by Matt Wilson. Offensively, I think the game plan after that was just don't make mistakes, don't give them the game. So from that standpoint, I thought the offense was actually pretty effective.
Well, I think that really when you look at it, Gary, the question was, could Clemson score?
Right.
And, I mean, when it got to that point, really, I would have to agree with you. I mean, the thing was just don't lose this thing. Don't make a mistake. But it was 10-6. Listen. Clemson had an opportunity to take the lead there. Anthony Jennings made the play of the game. We saw that earlier, the strip, And then, of course, Deron Payne coming away with it. And then you had the pick six. And, I mean, the game was over.
Yeah, after that it was over. Hate to lose Jennings, though, as well as he played again. No update on Cotton, although he was not spotted at practice today. J.C. Hassenauer is working in his right guard spot. Well, still to come on Tider Insider Television, Alabama, Georgia, all SEC National Championship. You know, that's got some people gnawing on their gums. We'll break down the matchup with the SEC champion Bulldogs coming up. Plus, we'll be welcoming your phone calls, emails, and tweets. You see the information on your screen. As always, the phone number 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. You can email us at the email address right there, WVUA23.com, TITV at WVUA23.com, or tweet at us using the hashtag TITV. We'll be right back with Tider Insider Television on a Wednesday night this week, right after this.
No, I'm proud of the SEC, and I'm proud of the competition in our league, and I'm proud of the good teams that we have, you know, in our league. And I certainly think that, you know, Georgia has an outstanding team, and I think that there were other very good teams in our league.
Welcome back to Tider Insider TV. Wednesday night this week, as we were traveling back from New Orleans yesterday alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. For the second time in the last 6 years, the national championship features two teams from the SEC. In yesterday's teleconference, Nick Saban expressed some discontent with the quick turnaround for this game, Monday to Monday. But, you know, both teams will be ready for the game regardless. Rodney, what do you see from Kirby Smart, the former Alabama defensive coordinator, and this group of SEC champion Georgia Bulldogs?
Man, I tell you what a job the guy's done. I mean, you know, really, to be honest with you, I had my doubts when they hired Kirby Smart, inexperienced guy, big job, replacing a guy that won 150 games in 10 years or 15 years, so he averaged 10 wins a season. You know, but Gary, hey, listen. He has taken the Nick Saban model to Georgia, and we're seeing that. You saw this game against Oklahoma. I mean, they certainly faced a lot of adversity, and they fought back and won the game, down 17 points. What an incredible performance they had against a quarterback like Baker Mayfield. So this team, you know, when I look at them, Gary, I look and I see a lot of what I've seen in Alabama the past several years. Very tough, very physical football team. Run the ball. I think they've got a really good identity on offense. They've done a great job with the freshman quarterback there. You see him there, Jake Fromm. You know, I mean, they're almost like a mirror image.
Yeah, and both teams are going to know each other so well. Both coaching staffs obviously going to know each other so well. Nick Saban, though, is 11-0 against his former assistants. The closest margin of victory in those games has been 14 points. So he has not let any of them get the best of him. And this is for the national championship, though. The stakes are raised, but I like Nick Saban's odds in these kind of games, man. Yeah.
You know, Alabama started the season in Atlanta against Jimbo Fisher, a former Saban assistant, and now they're ending the season in Atlanta against Kirby Smart, former Alabama assistant. So he's certainly, you know, this is what we hear when these type of games are being played. But you know, Gary, I'll say this. I don't know that this season, when you look at all the college football, there will be a more intense football game than what we're going to see. I mean, we're going to see a throwback game.
Yeah.
It's going to be physical. It's going to be the kind of game Gary Harris likes to watch.
Yeah, I do like them.
Yeah.
And you saw the graphic, 6 national championship game appearances for Alabama in the last 9 years. Remarkable. 3 in a row now. This junior class, Mika Fitzpatrick, many others, have never had a season where they didn't play for the national championship.
Wow. You know, you look at it, Gary, and, you know, it doesn't get any better.
No, it's all that they know. But for Georgia, it's new. We'll see how the Bulldogs handle it. Well, a mixed bag for the Alabama basketball team. We'll have more on the Tide's big win, but then disappointing loss. And up next, we'll welcome your phone calls, emails, and tweets. We know many of you want to get through and talk Alabama football on the verge of another national championship. We'll take your calls at the phone number on your screen. You can also email us or tweet at us using the hashtag TITV. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, the award-winning Tider Insider TV. We'll return after this timeout. On Saturday, the Bama men's basketball team picked up a huge win at home over then number 5 Texas A&M. It was a dominating performance that Alabama won by 22 points. But then last night, the Tide dropped the road game, 76-75 at Vanderbilt. Bama's now 9-5 on the season, 1-1 on the SEC, and will take on Georgia in Athens on Saturday. Basketball and football, Tide and the Dogs coming up on Saturday and Monday. Welcome back, and let's head right to the phone lines. Rodney, sponsored by Daniel Moore's New Life Art. And the New Life Art Hotline has a couple of available lines right now at 205-348-WVUA. First up, our pal Sammy up in Walker County. Good evening, Sammy.
Thanks, Gary and Rodney. Great coverage down in New Orleans, Gary, you and your whole staff down there.
Thank you, sir.
Happy New Year and all that good stuff. But I think the two main things about that game that I take from it is in a big game or any game, Gary and Rodney, you have to have a great game plan. It sounds simple, but the mental aspect, Coach Saban and his staff got into those players' heads. They were ready. Mentally, they had something to prove, and they showed it. They dominated, and that was the difference of the whole game, I think. What do y'all think?
I think it's a great point, Sammy. I think the team, even though they were the betting favorite in Las Vegas, a lot of people were questioning in Alabama, should they even be in the playoff to begin with? And I saw a lot of the national analysts picking Clemson to win the game, some picking Clemson to win it handily. I think Booger McFarland said from ESPN that it wasn't even close as far as the two teams. Clemson was much better. So I do think that stuck with Alabama. They're not used to hearing that, and I do think it kind of fueled them, Rodney.
Well, it did, and I'm also going to say this while we're talking about the game plan. Listen, Brian Dable did he did an incredible job. He took a game plan and modified it and made it really simple.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they put Jalen Hurts in good situations, great opportunities in the passing game, didn't make it too complicated. And you talked about playing to the defense.
Yep,
it was curtailed perfectly.
And that defense, Jeremy Pruitt, they were in attack mode. I think watching the game, Rodney, they felt like their defensive line had an advantage against Clemson's offensive line, and they did.
Yeah, they really did. I think when you look at the Clemson offensive tackles, Alabama had to notice, jump out on film, that those guys weren't quite maybe what people thought they were.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Alabama took advantage of it with their speed on the edge.
Good call, Sammy. Let's go over to Pelham and talk to Mike. Mike, welcome into the program.
Thank you, Gary. My comment is about Jalen Hurts.
Okay.
He still had flu symptoms when he played in that game. And you could tell in that long run that he still had flu symptoms, but look how good he played.
Yeah, Mike, certainly there were a lot of things going around that he wasn't feeling well. He had a surgical mask on when he left Malmore Athletic Complex to go to the airport last week, but several of the players did. But I'll tell you this, and I asked him point blank at the offensive press conference on Thursday how he was feeling, if he had been, ill from the flu bug, and he said no, he was fine. So I'm not disputing what you said, Mike. I think probably there was a little bit of the bug going around, but those guys have a lot of antibiotics and things at their disposal, and he played every snap, so I think he was good to go.
Yeah, those things, the flu and all those things, we hear those things sometimes. It's not that maybe he wasn't feeling a little badly, but he certainly was fine and ready to go.
And I think several of those guys probably didn't feel their best, but they played, and that's what you expect Jalen Hurts to do. People criticize his play. You cannot criticize his toughness. Rodney, I don't think he's ever missed a snap from injury, much less a game.
No, he's never left the game for injury.
Yeah.
You remember that blow he took against Ole Miss his freshman
right back
year?
in the next possession.
I never know.
So he answers the bell, and that's always been his MO. All right, let's take an email. By the way, the phone lines are open on the New Life Art Hotline. Rhonda wants to know, I've noticed that when a caller begins with Roll Tide, Gary will not respond back with a Roll Tide. Is there a reason? Well, Rhonda, to be honest with you, I have not ever thought about it. It's probably not anything conscious. This is Tider Insider TV, so I don't mind saying Roll Tide. I just, as a long background as a sportscaster, many years I probably wouldn't have said Roll Tide because I was covering other teams, so maybe that has something to do with it. But hey, Roll Tide, Rhonda. How about that? Thanks for the email. All right, we're going to take a timeout. Again, phone lines are open on the New Life Art Hotline presented by Daniel Moore. Give us a call now at 205-348-9882, or you can email us at TITV@WVUA23.com, or you can tweet at us using that hashtag TITV. We'll be back with more Roll Tide, Rhonda. We'll be back after this. Well, the Alabama women's basketball team outscored Missouri in 3 of the 4 quarters in its SEC opener, but that one quarter made all the difference. The Tigers dominated the second quarter 21-8, and that was enough for a 62-56 Mizzou win. Alabama's 10-4 will take on Florida in Gainesville tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Well, welcome back to Tider Insider TV with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. Let's get right back to Daniel Moore's New Life Art Hotline and welcome in Darla from Jasper. Hey, Darla, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
I was just wondering what you guys thought about the coach from UCF declaring their team champions.
All right, Darla, I think it was actually the athletics director. Scott Frost, the head coach, is already moved on to Nebraska. Listen, I got mixed feelings on it. They had a remarkable season, and 13-0, and they beat an SEC team, Auburn, which has beaten both Georgia and Alabama, who are in the College Football National Championship game. So I would be prideful, too. They're not the national champions, okay? They're just not. And but if they want to proclaim themselves national champions, that's their right. But I think people around the country recognize the national championship game is on Monday night in Atlanta.
Yeah, but I understand why he did it. It certainly generates a little more publicity for their program to say that and whatever, and it gets the buzz going about them. So kudos to them. I mean, Scott Frost did an incredible job, and for them to beat Auburn like they did. Yeah. And again, Auburn clearly didn't play their best game, but give Central Florida credit. Yeah, and Central Florida. So, Darla, it doesn't really bother Rodney or myself that much, but good for them, But the national championship game is on Monday night in Atlanta. All right, let's go to Hamilton and talk with Brian. Brian, what's up, buddy?
Hey, how y'all doing this evening, Rodney and Gary?
Doing well, Brian.
Good. Coach Dable, he was calling some pretty good plays, and I think he managed it pretty well at most of the time, but I guess my biggest question is why did he get his butt chewed out?
Okay, we can answer that for you, Brian. And he did call a good game. As Rodney alluded to, they played to their defense in that game. I think they knew the defense was playing well, and they just wanted to move the football, certainly take time off the clock, but not make mistakes. But late in the game, I think it was fourth quarter, midway through the fourth quarter, it's 24-6. He called back-to-back pass plays where Jalen rolled out and had to throw the ball out of bounds to stop the clock. And Coach Saban wasn't a big fan of those two particular play calls.
Just wanted him to, as Coach Saban said, take the air out of the ball, out of the game, meaning let's just run the clock and get this thing over with. And, sometimes that happens. But I will say, once again, I thought Brian Dable did an outstanding job with that offense, Gary.
Well, it happens. I saw Dabo Sweeney when I watched the game back just chewing out one of his assistants, and nothing was said about it. I think when it's Coach Saban and an offensive coordinator, it makes a lot of news. Thanks for the phone call. Let's get an email in from Gary and Helena, who says that Jalen Hurts, here we go, Jalen Hurts as a game manager, we can win if the defense plays like it did against Clemson. What are your thoughts? Yeah, Gary, if that defense is able to do to Georgia what it did to Clemson, Alabama's going to win. There's no doubt about that. And again, I think Jalen's a playmaker, but again, I don't have a problem with game managers. I've always said, Rodney, in my opinion, the first thing a quarterback has to be able to do is manage the game. If you can't manage the game, you can't play the position. So I think that they are, again, going to be looking to score points, but they don't want to give the game away. And the one thing about Jalen Hurts, he's got one interception this season, Rodney, and then the fumble against Clemson. He does protect the football, and I do think that's always Nick Saban's priority on offense.
What do they say? If a drive ends with a kick, it's been successful.
That's right.
It's not necessarily bad anyway. So whether that's a punt or PAT or field goal, whatever it might be. But, I agree with Gary. I think certainly the first thing he has to do is manage the game well. Let's eliminate some of the penalties. Not that they had penalties. I'm saying you want to make sure that you manage it well from that perspective. And as you said, the turnovers, which they did have one, but it certainly didn't turn out to be crucial.
All right, let's get a tweet in, Rod. And this is from at JNickSissa. Which sounds better that's more likely to happen? Stay at 4, move to 6, or an 8-team college football playoff? Well, I've been all over the map on this. Initially, I've been a proponent of 8. But the only way that 8 can work is you've got to do away with some regular season games or the college football championship or conference championship games. You can't ask these guys to play 16 games. And logistically, there would have to be changes. It would have to be home and away. There's no way. Even traveling 2 weeks in a row all over the country is hard. So right now, I'm for staying at 4.
I know we're out of time, but I'm for staying at 4 too. I mean, the season's too long.
Yeah. All right, Rod. We'll be back to wrap up Tider Insider TV right after this. You stay with us. Thanks for those phone calls. The end zones are already ready. The wraparound screen is featuring Alabama and Georgia from Monday night's national championship game. Of course, this is the Crimson Tide's second game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium this season. Alabama opened up the facility for college football with a 24-7 win over then number 3 Florida State. In this news, Rodney, President Trump will be at the game.
Wow.
How about that? I'm going to try to get him on Crimson Tide kickoff.
Oh, good luck.
All right, it's time for our final game predictions of the year. And this is, you say this a lot, but this clearly is the most important game of the season. Alabama and Georgia have earned the right to play for the national championship. How are you picking it?
Well, I tell you, Gary, I mean, really, who could have predicted this? I mean, especially at the end of the season when both Alabama and Georgia had lost Auburn, and it certainly didn't look like Alabama at one point might not make the playoffs, and now here we are. So, I look at this, Gary, and I say, Georgia is they think they're the new Alabama. And this is their opportunity, I think they think, to take that next step. But guess what? They're not going to take it. Alabama 24-17.
My goodness, we almost picked the identical score. We're still real close. I changed mine by 1 point because I picked Alabama last week to have 24 points, and they did. Of course, I picked Clemson to have 23, so they weren't even close there. I'm right there with you. Not so fast on Kirby Smart taking over the crown from Nick Saban. Saban moves to 12-0 against former assistants. 23-17, Bama gets it done, as you said, Rodney, in a throwback game. I think this is going to be a physical, run-oriented game, but I think Bama is still the king, and Georgia, hey, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board at least one more season. All right, our beautiful shirts and ties provided, as always, by the Locker Room in downtown Tuscaloosa, home of the original elephant wear. Get by and see the staff in person or shop online. Man, you're going to love it. Not just all the original elephant wear, but all their other great clothes. Plus, they treat you so well. I mean, you feel big time, and you look big time when you walk out of their store. All right, if you missed the show,